And so, of course, we are here. Good afternoon, everyone. It is always wonderful to join with you once again. So, at this time, before we begin, let us all come together in this moment now, remembering that the only time that is this moment now. There is no future, no past, just now. Be and breathe and open your mind to the expansion that you can receive here and now. Now, we can begin. Who would like to begin reading the first three paragraphs of this upcoming section?
Brandon.
True vision is the natural perception of spiritual sight, but it is still a correction rather than a fact. Spiritual sight is symbolic and therefore not a device for knowing. It is, however, a means of right perception, which brings it into the proper domain of the miracle. A vision of God would be a miracle rather than a revelation. The fact that perception is involved at all removes the experience from the realm of knowledge. That is why visions, however holy, do not last. The Bible tells you to know yourself or to be certain. Certainty is always of God. When you love someone, you have perceived him as he is, and this makes it possible for you to know him. Until you first perceive him as he is, you cannot know him. While you ask questions about him, you are clearly implying that you do not know God. Certainty does not require action. When you say you are acting on the basis of knowledge, you are really confusing knowledge with perception. Knowledge provides the strength for creative thinking, but not for right doing. Perception, miracles, and doing are closely related. Knowledge is the result of revelation and induces only thought. Even in its most spiritualized form, perception involves the body. Knowledge comes from the altar within and is timeless because it is certain. To perceive the truth is not the same as to know it. Right perception is necessary before God can communicate directly to his altars, which he established in his sons. There he can communicate his certainty and his knowledge will bring peace without question. God is not a stranger to his sons, and his sons are not strangers to each other. Knowledge, knowledge preceded both perception and time and will ultimately replace them. That is the real meaning of Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. And before Abraham was, I am. Perception can and must be stabilized, but knowledge is stable. Fear God and keep his commandments becomes know God and accept his certainty. Would you like me to finish the
Yes, we were going.
section?
Yes, we were going to suggest that.
Okay. 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 If you attack error in another, you will hurt yourself. You cannot know your brother when you attack him. Attack is always made upon a stranger. You are making him a stranger by misperceiving him, and so you cannot know him. It is because you have made him a stranger that you are afraid of him. Perceive him correctly so that you can know him. There are no strangers in God's creations. To create as he created you can create only what you know and therefore accept as yours. God knows his children with perfect certainty. He created them by knowing them. He recognizes them perfectly. When they do not recognize each other, they do not recognize him.
So,
Um, just a quick comment, if I could.
absolutely.
The where it says fear God and keep his commandments becomes know God and accept his certainty. Growing up Catholic and and then onto Baptist and that just that completely changes the whole. I mean, as far as um, the God fearing, which I was always we were brought up to kind of being, I guess, in constant fear at the same. It was always confusing to me, but this But to know God and accept His certainty, just that's it really just seems it's just so much more. There's so much more ring to it. There's just so much more. To me, it changes. It's just I wish this would have been when I was a kid, or just I wish we would have ran across this so much earlier. It just changes everything. But
Well, we were
I guess that
speaking.
was all I have.
That's wonderful. We were actually talking about this at some point earlier about those thoughts of wishing you could have had this before. Just be now. Now is the only time that is, you see. Does this make sense to you?
Hmm.
So now you
Yeah, thank you.
forward in the truth rather than what you learned previously. So this is the undoing of what you have learned, you see. So
Yes, thank you.
you're welcome. Any other thoughts? Yes.
Elena has her hand up. Hold on.
Okay, thank you so much. I have a question with regard to paragraph 5, line 11 and 12, where it says, even in the most spiritualized form, perception involves the body. Knowledge comes from the altar within and is timeless because it is certain. Can you shed more clarity or light on that, please?
In what area do you feel that there's confusion?
Well, it says knowledge comes from, okay, even in the most spiritualized form of perception involves the body.
Yes.
So when it says knowledge comes from the altar within, what is it referencing?
Your mind.
Okay.
Your mind. Yes, that's often mistaken for inside your body.
Yeah, okay.
Within, it's not within a body, but actually within your mind. So
Got it. Thank you.
thank you.
Carrie has her hand up.
Go ahead.
The first sentence in paragraph 7, it says, if you attack error in another, you will hurt yourself. My lesson for the day was love created me like itself and love holds no grievances. And last night I was talking to one of my daughters. She was at my other daughter's house, and my daughter in the background was like, you're taking Morgan, and was just being rude. I felt like she was being rude, and I'm like going, so then I thought, was with my lesson for today, I thought love holds no grievances, love looks past the error to the person. And that's kind of really what we're reading about here as like, so like I didn't say anything. I was debating on whether I should say something, and I kept saying, no, look past it, look past it. And that's what this is saying, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Rather than going with that old, and we will say it's a habit of thought, and going down that old train of thought, going with that feeling, what you did was you held the truth. Love holds no grievances. Therefore, why should I respond?
Right, right. Well, part of me is like, I'm her mother. I should say something so that she knows she's
really
that's the ego.
Yes, it's the ego and the thought that you are a certain role when really who you really are plays no real roles at all. There are no roles in the true reality. Does this make sense?
Well, historically, I've been like, if there's really a problem, somebody else will point it out to that person because people tend to do that. So I don't, if nobody else points that out, then I feel like that's my issue. It's, but it almost got me, and I thought, no, I don't think so. Mind training, right?
Right.
That's all. That made me think of that. My daughter, I'm like, wait, that's exactly what I'm working on.
Absolutely. So
thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to read the next? Well, let's see how many. The next 2 paragraphs will be the next section. Error and the ego.
John?
Yes. The abilities you now possess are only shadows of your real strength. All of your present functions are divided and open to question and doubt. This is because you are not certain how you will use them and are therefore incapable of knowledge. You are also incapable of knowledge because you can still perceive lovelessly. Perception did not exist until the separation introduced degrees, aspects, and intervals. Spirit has no levels, and all conflict arises from the concept of levels. Only the levels of the Trinity are capable of unity. The levels created by the separation cannot but conflict. This is because they are meaningless to each other. Consciousness, the level of perception, was the first split introduced into the mind after the separation, making the mind a perceiver rather than a creator. Consciousness is correctly identified as the domain of the ego. The ego is a wrong-minded attempt to perceive yourself as you wish to be rather than as you are. Yet you can know yourself only as you are because that is all you can be sure of.
There's one more sentence after that. Everything else is open to question.
We lost his connection.
It,
So, well, finishing that up, we'd like to know if you have any thoughts. If not, we can also go on.
I have a question about consciousness. This is quite enlightening in the sense that consciousness to me has implied something different. That when we talk about consciousness nowadays, my understanding has been that that's what we want to attain is consciousness. But this
Well,
is saying that's of the ego.
yes, it is. Without the ego, there was no need for consciousness, just as there is no need for perception. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
But yes,
Okay.
to become conscious means to become aware. And where that is you can change your mind. Does this make sense?
Right.
It is the domain of the ego, because without the ego, it is not there at all. So, but don't feel any amount of guilt about it. You see, this is part of the dream.
Right. So there is value in attaining awareness.
Absolutely.
You know, unawareness is of course where we really don't want to be.
Yes.
So developing awareness, and then that leads to knowing, that inner knowing.
Correct. Where there is no more need of any of this.
Right.
You see, that's at the very end. So many steps to be taken.
But at least the fact that I can appreciate the distinctions is an improvement for me.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yes, I have a question, and then Olga has her hand up. Anne asked, was perception created to see other than the truth? And in perceiving, we created the need for time?
Perception and time go hand in hand. They are basically one and the same. Does this make sense? They were made up by the ego mind in order to keep you asleep and unaware of your true self, you see.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Now, Olga?
Hi, everybody. Well, this made me think that when we are practicing awareness and in meditation and in daily practicing to be in the now, trying to be in the now as much as we can, breathing and being present, we are stepping into the isness, no? And that's what I guess where our true self the instance where you just are, and there's no separation. There's just this sense of wholeness, and that's, I guess, I'm not trying to describe it in words, but I guess that's where we're walking towards. That's why right now consciousness is part of that separation that we are perceiving from within something that is outside of ourselves. But the more that state becomes a whole and includes everything in love, that's when we are closer to the knowledge, where it's the certainty that everything is just is, and love is just what the nature of that. I don't know. Is that what this paraphrase is trying to tell you or tell us?
You're on the right track. You're on the right track.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to read the next two paragraphs?
Yes, of course. A ver, amor, me prestas tu libro.
Wait,
Sorry, it's just that my husband has the English version and I have the Spanish.
Well, before you begin, while you're getting there, there's another question. So
Yes, Julie had a question, and like to have her ask it. Go, Julie.
Hi,
hello.
thank you so much for taking my call, my question. I know this is probably a really big question, but I was wondering if at the end of the day, it's all just about our thinking, and that if we can just train our thinking to focus on non-duality and God and loving each other. And my second part of that question is, when we're on the other side of this veil, are we no longer thinking?
Well, you're on the right track as well. You see, as you go forward, what you are doing is unwinding your mind from the land of thought, you see. Does this make sense? That means the thinking. Everything is thought here, you see.
Yes.
You are a thought. You are a thought of God, you see. So what you are working toward is the releasement of judgment and perception at all, you see. Does this make sense?
Yeah, but how do you do that?
You keep going, you keep putting into play the practices that we have taught. That's day in, day out, moment by moment awareness of how you feel and where your mind is taking you. Is it taking you down the same old patterns that you have been stuck in all of your life here? Or are you shifting out and making different decisions? Does this make sense? Meaning
Yes.
that in alignment with what do you understand at this point of God?
Right. So just keep catching the thoughts.
Yes, just pay attention. When you enter into any situation, pay attention to what the feelings are that are coming up that are leading you into that, and what mind you are entering into. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Meaning you can always choose the mind of peace entering into any situation, or conflict. Those are your two choices. That would be the Holy Spirit or the ego.
Yes.
Forgiveness or blame. Those really are your only two options. And you can tell by how you feel which one you have chosen. So,
Right. Thank
and the
you.
more you choose the right-minded thinking, the more the latter fades away. Does this make sense?
Yes. And what about when we're on the other side?
There is no other side. We know this gets a lot of people. There is no other side. There is, in true reality, there is no veil, you see. It's just an illusion. Once you get to the quote unquote other side, you see that, oh, there is no other side. Does this make sense? Yes, it is different than what you perceive here because you don't perceive anything at all. There is only love. And there is nothing opposite to it, you see. There is no contrast on the quote unquote other side.
So it's just a full releasement.
Yes.
Ah, got it.
Beautiful.
So on that thought, before I read, is it something like when we're fantasizing, where we're thinking, okay, I want to go on vacation, and you're thinking of the beach, and everything is in your mind, it's not happening, but you are already traveling in your mind to the beach and how nice it would be to be there. So in the same note can be an example of that never existed. I mean, when I'm still here, I'm not at the beach, but when we are step into the true reality, I mean, it's already here. We're just in that frame of mind that fantasizing like a huge illusion that is keeping you in that fantasy mode or in that illusion mode, but in reality, we're still in love. I mean, with just like in that example of thinking of the beach without being there.
You can use that, absolutely. You can indeed use that. But remember this, true reality is not a fantasy at all. Does this make sense?
You know, what I thought is this reality is the fantasy.
Yes,
this that we think is
everything here in the dream is a fantasy. None of it is anything other than a fantasy.
Okay.
So.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So reading paragraph 3 is the ego is the questioning aspect of the post-separation self, which was made rather than created. It is capable of asking questions, but not of perceiving meaningful answers, because these would involve knowledge and cannot be perceived. The mind is therefore confused because only one-mindedness can be without confusion. A separated or divided mind must be confused. It is necessarily uncertain about what it is. It has to be in conflict because it is out of accord with itself. This makes its aspects strangers to each other. And this is the essence of the fear-prone condition in which attack is always possible. You have every reason to feel afraid as you perceive yourself. This is why you cannot escape from fear until you realize that you did not and could not create yourself. You can never make your misperceptions true, and your creation is beyond your own error. That is why you must eventually choose to heal the separation. Right-mindedness is not to be confused with the knowing mind, because it is applicable only to right perception. You can be right-minded or wrong-minded, and even this is subject to degrees, clearly demonstrating that knowledge is not involved. The term right-mindedness is properly used as a correction for wrong-mindedness and applies to the state of mind that induces accurate perception. It is miracle-minded because it heals misperception, and this is indeed a miracle in view of how you perceive yourself.
So any thoughts?
So this is where knowledge is when the moments, I guess, when we are stepping into knowledge is when it comes to us. I mean, it's not something, as you say, when you think, it's just when you are in silence and an answer comes to you. Is that part of knowledge or is not?
That can be part of knowledge. Yes, it is. You see, in the silence, you can access knowledge. And as you said, it dawns upon your mind.
Okay. So, and that's why it has that quality of certainty, because
yes, indeed. It is unshakable.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question.
Yes, Brandon has a question, and Randy and Carrie had a question. So let's start with Brandon.
Okay, I was under the impression that while we're having this experience or in consciousness, that we weren't able to touch knowledge until we were in reality. Is that that's kind of like the first part. As far as being, as far as being able to touch actual knowledge as opposed to right perception.
You can have knowledge come to your mind, like Olga was saying. It can dawn upon your mind. It just is that it will not last.
Okay, that makes sense. And the only other thing was kind of along the same lines that Julie was talking about, and I just want your help on this. Sometimes when I'm reading, I realize that I'm perceiving the book that I'm reading, at wherever I'm at, and the best I can. And sometimes I get a feeling, and this isn't necessarily a bad feeling, that if I was to actually fully understand what it is that I'm reading, then the floor would be ripped out in front of me, and then I would lose balance. Am I anticipating too much, or is it? It's just a. I guess it's
fear.
I don't know. It's a little awkward, but okay.
It's
okay.
Fear. It's fear, and it's quite natural to the ego to have that kind of fear. You see. Does this make sense? This is why we say we take you step by step. We don't just throw you into reality. You would be terrified. Does this make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That's interesting how we would be terrified. To me, it's just a.
You have no
Thank
idea.
you. That makes a lot of sense.
Yes, you have no idea how absolutely terrified you are. And we're not just talking about you. We're talking about everyone, you see. How terrified you really are of love. If you let love in fully and let it take over, everything you think you know is gone. Does this make sense? And what we're talking about is your personal, separate identity is gone. Does this make
That makes perfect sense. Thank you. Yes.
That's what the ego is so terrified of, because once you come to realize that you are a mind and you can change your mind, it is gone. When you make the right decision, you see.
So we just keep on stepping.
Step by step, step by step. That's why it is a gentle unwinding of what you have learned here, you see. That's what the correction is for. Step by step and gentle. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Randy.
Yeah, excuse me. So a couple of things. So is knowledge something we already possess, but we've forgotten that we contain it within ourselves, and we blocked our access to it?
Yes, indeed. Yes.
And also, is the only way to be in the now, which we all would like to be in, is without perception?
Yes, without thinking of future or past, you see.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for all your beautiful insights.
You're welcome.
So Carrie asked, are we like in a virtual reality game?
Yes, pretty much. Sometimes it's been called the Matrix and all of that. It's really a dream. It's a game. That's one way of looking at it, and it is helpful if you see it that way. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Wonderful. then you can distance yourself from the figure that you think that you are, because you see, well, this is just a figure in a game. You see.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. So who would like to read the next 2 paragraphs?
Looking for a hand up. Randy.
Starting with 5.
Yes.
Perception always involves some misuse of mind because it brings the mind into areas of uncertainty. The mind is very active. When it chooses to be separated, it chooses to perceive. Until then, it wills only to know. Afterwards, it can only choose ambiguously, and the only way out of ambiguity is clear perception. The mind returns to its proper function only when it wills to know. This places it in the service of spirit, where perception is changed. The mind is divided. The mind chooses to divide itself when it chooses to make its own levels. But it could not entirely separate itself from spirit, because it is from spirit that it derives its whole power to make or create. Even in miscreation, the mind is affirming its source, or it would merely cease to be. This is impossible because the mind belongs to spirit, which God created, and which is therefore eternal. The ability to perceive made the body possible, because you must perceive something, and with something. That is why perception involves an exchange or translation, which knowledge does not need. The interpretive function of perception, a distorted form of creation, then permits you to interpret the body as yourself in an attempt to escape from the conflict you have induced. Spirit, which knows, could not be reconciled with this loss of power because it is incapable of darkness. This makes spirit almost inaccessible to the mind and entirely inaccessible to the body. Thereafter, spirit is perceived as a threat because light abolishes darkness merely, by showing you it is not there. Truth will always overcome error in this way. This cannot be an active process of correction because, as I have already emphasized, knowledge does not do anything. It can be perceived as an attacker, but it cannot attack. What you perceive as its attack is your own vague recognition that knowledge can always be remembered, never having been destroyed. Wow.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's beautiful that our natural state is a willingness to know.
Yes.
And not to constantly interpret everything that happens and make it into our own reality. That's very refreshing.
Absolutely.
Just remembering that that's our natural state so we can try and get back there.
Yes, indeed.
So beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions before we move on? If not, who would like to finish up this section? If you would like to, Randy, if you'd like to finish up this section, since there's only one more paragraph.
Sure. Love to. God and his creations remain in surety, and therefore know that no miscreation exists. Truth cannot deal with errors that you want. It was a man who remembered spirit and its knowledge. As a man, I did not attempt to counteract error with knowledge, but to correct error from the bottom up. I demonstrated both the powerlessness of the body and the power of the mind by uniting my will with that of my Creator. I naturally remembered spirit and its natural purpose. I cannot unite your will with God's for you, but I can erase all misperceptions from your mind if you will bring it under my guidance. Only your misperceptions stand in your way. Without them, your choice is certain. Sane perception induces sane choosing. I cannot choose for you, but I can help you to make your own right choice. Many are called, but few are chosen. Should be. All are called, but few choose to listen. Therefore, they do not choose right. The chosen ones are merely those who chose right sooner. Right minds can do this now, and they will find rest unto their souls. God knows you only in peace, and this is your reality. The truth can be simple, that's for sure. It is.
Entirely simple.
Yeah.
And like we
Yeah,
said,
I love that. Many are called, but few are chosen.
absolutely.
All are called, but few choose to listen.
That's right. That's right.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or remarks at this point? If not, then we can move on to the next section, which is Beyond Perception. Who would like to read the first 3 paragraphs of this section?
Julie had her hand up first.
I have said that the abilities you possess are only shadows of your real strength, and that perception, which is inherently judgmental, was introduced only after the separation. No one has been sure of anything since. I have made it clear that the resurrection was the means for the return to knowledge, which was accomplished by the union of my will with the Father's. We can now establish a distinction that will clarify some of our subsequent statements. Since the separation, the words create and make have become confused. When you make something, you do so out of a specific sense of lack or need. Anything made for a specific purpose has no true generalizability. When you make something to fill a perceived lack, you are tacitly implying that you believe in separation. The ego has invented many ingenious thought systems for this purpose. None of them is creative. Inventiveness is wasted effort, even in its most ingenious form. The highly specific nature of invention is not worthy of the abstract creativity of God's creations. Knowing, as we have already observed, does not lead to doing. The confusion between your real creation and what you have made of yourself is so profound that it has become literally impossible for you to know anything. Knowledge is always stable, and it is quite evident that you are not. Nevertheless, you are perfectly stable as God created you. In this sense, when your behavior is unstable, you are disagreeing with God's idea of your creation. You can do this if you choose, but you would hardly want to do it if you were in your right mind.
Any thoughts?
What about artistic creations? I'm getting from this that there's a lot of things that we create that are meaningless. But what about the creations of our inner guidance or our inner passion?
Those are reflections, you see. Those are reflections.
Ah,
So anything you see here or perceive here that resonates with you on this level, and you can feel something, you're drawn to something, something is reached within you, you are simply interacting with a reflection of who you really are, you see, such as love.
yes.
And it is not about the form, it is about the expression, it is about the content. Does this make sense?
Yes.
So,
Brandon has a question, and then John.
Okay. When it says inventiveness is wasted effort in its most ingenious form, the first thing that springs to mind is like Nikola Tesla. When people when people, you know, like when they receive these things, I mean, 'cause, from what I understand, it's just kind of like these are okay. Let me put it this way so I don't get tongue tied. If someone has an idea, is it always necessarily inventiveness, or can it just be like an inspired idea, regardless of whether or not it's artistic or technical? Something that would, like, you know, something that we'd be able to do something better or less wasteful than we do now. Would that still be kind of contained within, I guess, everything in the form?
everything is
I,
form. Yes. But as we
this
were
is a tough
saying,
one for me.
these things can be reflections, you see, reflections
Okay.
of right-mindedness, and reflections of love, you see. So don't get hung up or too hung up on trying to figure it out. Does this make sense?
Okay.
Remember, nothing here means anything, you see.
I have to remember that.
Yes.
That's for sure.
Okay, so John, and then Patrick has a question.
In a similar vein, yeah, this is an interesting paragraph to me too, because I like Brandon was saying, that it seems surprising, and yet I try to apply it in my own daily life, this whole concept. And what I work as a florist, and so when I receive a flower order, when someone wants something, I'm doing it out of, you know, there's an intention, there's a goal, there's a making. But what I'm learning to do is to infuse that work with creativity, with love. And that is really blossomed, literally blossomed in my awareness now as I learn this teaching. And I'm learning that I can actually apply that creativity in my work. So it's kind of a blending in a way, but I think it's like more of an infusion of that love and creativity into what I'm doing and how I'm relating to people throughout my work.
Yes. It's beautiful. These are reflections of love, you see. So you're allowing love to express itself through your work. And it is beautiful, you see.
Yeah, and ironically, I started out as a lawyer, and somehow I was guided away from that to something that could allow me to be creative. And now it's evolving more, and it continues to evolve as I practice, and it just shifts, and it becomes more about being present with what I'm doing, and I'm kind of lost in it in a way. Not in a bad way, but lost in the creativity and just finding joy in that process.
Absolutely. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so Patrick has his hand up, and
Um, my question is about the if someone awakens and like is in a sense absorbed into a state of pure knowledge. For example, in your case, as Jesus, is someone who's in pure knowledge. I would think maybe they're not aware of the ego world. And so what is the mechanics of someone like an ascended master being called from a state of pure knowledge to help with the ego world?
It's not that you don't notice the ego anymore. You see, you just know what is true, you see. So you look beyond the error. Does this make sense?
So you could still interact with other ascended masters, for example, after you've ascended?
Well, yes, because all is one. You're always interacting. We are always interacting as one.
Okay, because sometimes it sounds like you're just in a big, you know, illuminated haze with no interaction.
Not at all. You interact with life after you have woken up, you have awakened. You just engage in life in a different way, meaning you engage in life from a mind of love rather than a mind of fear. You see clearly, meaning you perceive correctly rather than through the lens of the distorted mind, the ego. Does this make sense?
Yes, sounds much better.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
How is this put? There's a saying, it's a Buddhist saying. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. It's just how you do it and with what mind you're doing it with that changes. Does this make sense?
Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. So how many minutes?
Oh, Audrey has a question.
Okay.
So it sounds from what you just answered, it sounds like there's a separateness and a oneness at the same time.
It's not a separateness at all. There is only a oneness. But you notice, how do we put this? We want to put this in such a way that you can understand, just allow the understanding, meaning get the analytical mind out of the way. Does this make sense? So it just is that you come into true awareness, you perceive with right-mindedness, and therefore you see only true. Does this make sense? Meaning you don't, how do we want to put this? Basically, you can still see the ego. The ego doesn't exist, but you know that what you're looking at is not real. That's not the reality of whatever you're looking at. That's an illusion. So you overlook the error and you join only with the truth. Does this make sense?
No. I'm sorry, I'd love to say yes. After you leave Erin, and Erin goes back home to be with her mom, and you're no longer, you're back, not on the other side.
We never leave.
Is it like you say, hey, Mary, hi, Mom, hey, Augustine, how are you? You know.
No.
Persa,
Not at
hi.
all. There is no separation. There is no separateness. There is no separateness. All are one. All is one.
Okay.
We know that this is a thought that perhaps you cannot quite grasp, but the only thing you can do with these thoughts, with the truth, is to allow and accept, you see. Don't try to pick it apart and realize the only mind that tries to pick these things apart is the ego mind, you see. Can you imagine just being in a state of acceptance and just allowing this to dawn upon your mind and just be at peace, you see? Just choose to be at peace, no matter what your mind is perceiving. But instead, what you can do is choose to see as through a mind of peace. Does this make sense?
Yes.
As we said, the mind that is the questioning mind is the ego mind, you see. And so what you want to do is move beyond that to who you really are, who does not question but accepts. Does this make sense? Is there a question?
Yes, so you're with everyone and everything, even
Yes.
those hurting others?
Well, there's this, what happens in the human mind is a tendency to think that by us being one with all that is, that pain and suffering and deprivation and lack is also part of all that is, when that's not true at all, you see. That's the illusion. Does this make sense? Yes, we are always with you, but no, we don't join you in these miscreations. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Wonderful. We're asking about time. Yes, and there's a question. Thank you.
I do have a little bit of a question about that. I think it's kind of a mystery to us. I mean, I can imagine that we are all one mind that's sleeping and dreaming that we're in this existence.
Yes.
But I do know that I think I know. I say I know. You know, that there are there's individuation.
In illusion, yes. Yes. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I'm thinking about, well, I know one person said that it was explained as, it's almost like all in all is the a disco ball. It was just a way of
Yes.
describing, and each of us is one of the facets on the disco
Yes.
ball.
But that does not make you separate. You see.
Right. And I think it's just difficult because of the sleeping
Right.
mind for us to
Right.
understand this.
And so you get beyond the sleeping mind, and you can use that as a way to understand a disco ball, you see. So yourself always remains, you see. But yourself is one with all, you see. So does this make sense?
Yeah. And I was just thinking about, it seems like you're here individually, but you're
Right.
not.
Not exactly right. That's just perception that tells you that, you see. So
Okay. Thank you.
thank you. Did that answer your question? Wonderful. Wonderful.
Adrian, do you have your hand up?
We have 5 minutes. 5 more minutes.
Okay.
So
Dory has her, right?
I chosen to be in massage school, massage training. And so when I'm working on people who are not bodies, and I just ask for a miracle, and I try to just in my mind think we're one, and think, you know, just that we are one. And sometimes I know I get little signs that the person was really open and some miracle happened. So that's cool. And sometimes it's hard to, because I'm supposed to be thinking about what I'm doing and what I'm doing next. And so it's kind of like double thought. It's like, but I just start out with, okay, Spirit, take it, and may there be a miracle. And so, any job or anywhere I am, that could be, but it just seems like it's just a kind of a wonderful way to connect to people.
It is. It really is. To hold only beneficial thoughts in the mind. You are one, you see.
Yeah.
So yes, indeed, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to do. And we do encourage this, of course, for everyone. So, is there a question?
No, not really.
Wonderful.
Just know that it's happening.
Absolutely.
It's just, I don't understand, but I don't need to.
You don't
That's
need
what
to. Right.
miracles just go wherever they go, and
Exactly.
whatever.
Exactly. And it's the joining that is so beautiful that you are experiencing, you see.
Mhm.
So keep going with that. That's beautiful. So, well then. There are only 3 minutes left, so we might as well wrap up here. We have enjoyed this immensely. We love you, and we always look forward to joining with you again and again and again until we are just simply joined. You see, we are joined. There is no separation. But we are always with you, though you may feel that we are not. We are always with you, and we love you. And we thank you for this experience of joining once again. You are blessed as always, and we are always with you. Namaste.